Welcome everybody to the Native CDFI Network's bi-weekly call now. My name is Jackson Brossi, and it's my privilege and honor to be the Executive Director for the Native CDFI Network. And as everybody knows, we're a national network of community development financial institutions, and our members work and operate and support Indian country across 27 different states. So thank you for what you do, and thanks to everybody who's joining us here today. Today we've got a special program, and we're going to talk with some of our friends from the CDFI funds Native Americans program and talk to them about the recently announced Rapid Response Program, RRP for short. And this, we're excited about the program. We're excited to learn more. And we also know that this is a fast-moving program, and they want to get money out the door soon. So hopefully we're able to get some questions answered. Hopefully you're able to walk away with more, some whatever questions are in your mind taken care of, and you're better off and able to help your community. So thank you again for what you're doing. I think our board chair, Pete Upton, is, I know he's traveling today, doing work, but we have a couple other board members on. I see Cindy Logston and Christopher Coburn and Natalie Charlie. And I want to open it up, see if they have any other opening words. Okay. Well, feel free to chime in whenever. And then here's a slide we keep in here. We're here to share, learn, and connect while everybody is socially distant, but at the same time still working toward our ultimate goals of increasing opportunity in Indian country. So thank you. Here's a quick overview of our agenda today. We want to share some quick Native CDFI news that we think is relevant, and then get into a couple announcements from our members. And then the meat and the fun stuff, hear from our friends at the CDFI Fund about the Rapid Response Program. So here we go. This is welcome news, I think. Probably not news to anybody, but I just want to reiterate and underline that our friend, Representative Deb Haaland, has advanced past the Senate Energy and Commerce Committee this week. Yesterday, in fact, and her vote will be, they haven't announced a vote yet, but it's not happening today, unfortunately. But this is a great news. Senator Murkowski, who represents Alaska, and many of our Alaska Native CDFIs are good friends with her. She supported the nomination, so that's great news. And as folks remember, Representative Haaland joined us at our last annual summit, so looking forward to that. And another friend from the Native CDFI advocacy world, Zach Ducheneau, who's been featured on our Friday call, has been selected to head the Farm Service Agency. So we're excited about that. I know that probably our folks in South Dakota are sad to have him leave, but it's great to have him there representing Indian country, and we look forward to working a bit more with the FSA. So thanks. And I think folks have also been asking a bit about the $1.9 trillion Democratic stimulus. So it's passed the House. I think everybody knows that it is in the Senate, expected a vote soon. Unfortunately, it's not drawing bipartisan support, but it does have a number of provisions that we think are notable and want to share with our folks. It contains $20 billion for tribal governments and for COVID response. To put that in perspective, the last CARES bill had less than half of that. It also contains a provision to increase funding for something called the State Small Business Credit Initiative, SSBCI for short. And this is a program that several folks identified as really being underutilized and not accessed by Indian country. And in my my quick conversations with a few of our members, most of our members had not interacted with the SSBCI. And so Congress wants to make sure that in the future, I guess, as they allocate more money toward this program, they're looking at 5 billion. Previously was authorized at 1.5 billion. So this could be a lot of money. This is about as much money that goes into the new market tax credit program in an annual year. So what's relevant to our folks is that the SSBCI has won a tribal set aside, and NCN is working with folks from Congress and eventually, hopefully, folks from Treasury about how to make sure that tribal governments partner with native CDFIs that want to work with them to disperse this 500 million set aside. We think that native CDFIs are obviously well situated and experts in administering programs like the SSBCI. And so we want to make sure that our members have an opportunity to partner with tribal governments if they so choose. The legislation also has language in there requiring states to submit plans about how they would coordinate with minority depository institutions and CDFIs to use this money for lending and finance. And we are working with Congress and eventually, hopefully, Treasury to make sure that that language also includes states submitting a program to work with native CDFIs. I feel pretty good about about including that later on. So, and then I put some background about the SSBCI since if you're like myself, you hadn't interacted with it that much, but here's the official background is they're administered to strengthen state government programs or state programs that support private financing to small businesses and manufacturing.
Like he was at home today, Cora.
And
on that call, it looked like he was. I guess. Yeah.
So reminder to mute when you are.
Oh, well, yeah, my phone.
Cool. All right, there we go. But so that's one thing we're keeping our eye on. One other thing we wanted to flag was there are a number of tribal consultations, and these have been included in our last email. And if you are a CDFI that works closely with the tribal government, we wanted to flag that. There's a Treasury CARES Act tribal consultation that was announced yesterday that is on the 18th of March. Wanted to flag that one as well. And I had a quick question before we get going about PPP forgiveness, and you can drop it in the chat now or contact me later. But I've been talking to a few different folks who have had or are having trouble getting their PPP loan forgiven. We think this is a problem. That should not be a problem, and we want to address it. But in order to address it, it'd be helpful if you let me know. I know of 2 instances right now where CDFIs are having trouble getting the PPP forgiven. And did I see a hand raised on that? No. Okay. Some quick announcements. Our friends at the Native Partnership for Housing are doing the PPP as lenders. So this is good news that a Native CDFI that didn't initially meet the program threshold has been approved as a lender, and they wanted to share their information. If you or your clients are still looking at PPP loans, either for the first or second draw, consider them. South Dakota Native Homeownership Alliance or Coalition is seeking a program manager, and we have that information on our email. And with that, I think we're ready to go. And we are fortunate to be joined by Clint Hastings, who is a good friend to Native CDFIs, and he's also a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. He is the Associate Program Manager for Native Initiatives at the Department of Treasury's CDFI Fund. And he's worked several areas. He's worked with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He's worked with the Cherokee Nation Washington office. And he's also a lawyer by training. So really happy to have Clint here. And Clint's been generous with his time every time we ask him to join us. So no stranger to the program. And we are looking forward to hearing more from Clint. So
I'm gonna have
Clint.
to set up that other computer. I'm wasting my time here, which means you're gonna have to redo all your certificates. I mean,
Yeah.
And the only one is the, and I think I know how to do it.
There we go. So Clint, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you should be able to take over the thing. And
Great. Thanks so much for having us today, Jackson, and your board of directors and all your members. I'm really excited to be here to discuss the CDFI Fund, CDFI Rapid Response Program, or what we are referring to in shorthand as RRP. And I want to do a couple of things today. First, I want to do a very quick demo of how to launch a CDFI RRP application, as well as provide a high-level overview of the program's requirements before we move into question and answer. Jackson, can you all see my screen now?
we cannot. So it's worth giving it one more try.
Let me. What about now?
Yes, perfect. We have Amos up there.
All right. Great. Yeah, I was going to say this should be a familiar view for most of you participating in the call today. In order to launch an RRP application, you're just going to go to your organization profile. And one thing that's tripped up folks a little bit in the early going with the application launch is that they're expecting a new program profile, but you're going to launch the RRP application through the CDFI NACA program profile, which you should all be familiar with, because that's the same place that you're going to launch your NACA or CDFI program applications. I'm not going to launch an application here in order to save a little bit of time, but you'll see down here at the bottom of the screen, there's a button that says New CDFI RRP Application. That's where you'll click to create your application. It's going to be a straightforward process that you should be familiar with. I've already created an application for this test organization. I'm going to pop that open right now. And again, this should look very familiar to everyone on the call that has either created or submitted a NACA program or CDFI program application in the past. The RRP application was designed to be a very pared down version of the NACA program FA application. So again, on the table of contents over there on the left side of the screen, you'll see sections of the application that should look very familiar to you. One thing that is intentional and unique to the RRP application is that there is no narrative required. We're merely collecting some application level information about your organization, an award request amount, application financial data, and some compliance evaluation questions. So very pared down, very straightforward. We designed this program to greatly reduce applicant burden. The first thing I'm going to do is go to the application financial data. This is a common theme in my comments today, but again, this should look very, very familiar to you. We've got the same data fields that we collect for the NACA program applications. However, one thing that is different is we are not collecting any projected financials. We're only collecting 3 years of historic financial data and your current year of financial data. This portion of the application is going to allow us to do a couple of things. For our unregulated CDFIs, the application financial data is used to create the Step 2 financial analysis score, which is the same process and scoring system that we use to evaluate NACA program applications. And also the application financial data is going to play into the maximum amount of funding that you can request via the RRP. The 3 fields that are going to directly affect the amount of funding that you can request will be the on-balance sheet loans closed in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year. So this field right here. And for most of you, this may be the only field that affects the amount of the award that you can request. But a couple of other fields also play into that calculation. It includes the on-balance sheet loan guarantees made in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year, as well as the total equity investments closed in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year. So once you've completed your application financial data, you can complete the program request, the RRP request section of the application. This, again, is going to look very familiar. You can put in your request in this field right here, along with your initial payment request in the second field. Down at the bottom of this section, you're going to see this field, which is going to be calculated on 150% of your organization's total financing activities for the most recent historic fiscal year. So in other words, those three fields that I just reviewed and just highlighted will be used to calculate this amount. So the sum of those three fields will be multiplied by 150% essentially, and that will determine the maximum amount of the RRP request. You do not have to request the maximum that you're eligible for. An organization must request at least $200,000 up to a maximum of $5 million. But if during the completion of the application, your organization determines that it doesn't want to request the maximum it's eligible for, that's fine. It won't count against you. We won't think anything about it. The next portion of the application that I want to highlight very quickly are the compliance evaluation questions. Again, these questions are analogous to the ones collected in the NACA program application, and they'll be used to calculate your total compliance score, which is also part of our Step 2 review. Will be evaluated exactly like it is during the standard NACA and CDFI program funding rounds. Those are really the two most significant sections of the application, or the three most significant sections of the application. Like I said, there's some high-level applicant level information that we collect, just address, DUNS number, EIN number, things like that we collect for all of our organizations that apply for awards. One thing that is a little bit different in the application is that because there is just one RRP, there's not a CDFI program, a NACA program, we do ask organizations to affirmatively state whether or not that they meet the definition of a CDFI that serves a Native community. So you all will likely be answering yes to this question. And then after that portion of the application is answered, you'll be asked to attest to two additional eligibility criteria: that your organization has a Native community or other targeted population of Native American, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian as part of your target market certification, and that at least 50% of your past activities were in Native communities. This is exactly the same as the eligibility requirement for the NACA program. So if your organization has been eligible to apply for a NACA program award and has received a NACA program award in the past, you should not have any issues meeting this basic threshold. So from there, I'm going to move into the more formal presentation portion of my comments today. But what I hope that you take away from this very quick demo is that this program has been designed to have a very streamlined application. We think it's something that all of our certified CDFIs can complete fairly quickly and without any outside assistance, unless they just really think they need it. But it's going to come down to answering compliance questions, submitting some application financial data question, and some high-level information about your organization. All right, so I've got a few slides prepared. Just a little background information about the RRP. The CDFI Rapid Response Program was created in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, and it provided the CDFI fund with $1.25 billion in supplemental appropriations for the CDFI fund to provide grants to CDFIs to support, prepare for, and respond to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, Congress required that a minimum of $25 million of that total appropriation be awarded to benefit Native communities. And one thing I want to stress during my comments today is that it is a minimum of $25 million. We are not capping the amount of RRP funding that Native CDFIs can receive at $25 million. So if response from the Native CDFI industry is very robust, we've done some internal calculations and we believe that Native organizations can get well above this threshold, but it is dependent upon applicant demand. As I've alluded to earlier in my comments, we designed this program to quickly deploy capital to certified CDFIs through a very streamlined application review process in order to provide certified CDFIs with the resources that they need to help counter the economic impacts of COVID-19 in the communities that they serve. We're also, as you can see from the demo that I did, leveraging our existing IT infrastructure and review process in order to expedite the timing and announcement of RRP awards. Congress required the CDFI fund to implement a formula approach that takes into account criteria such as certification status, financial and compliance performance, portfolio and balance sheet strength, a diversity of CDFI business model types, and program capacity when making RRP awards. And this is a program that's designed to provide awards to the majority of applicants, a significant majority of applicants. It's not like the CDFI program or NACA programs in the financial assistance portion of our funding rounds, in which only a certain percentage of organizations receive awards. And if we have the vast majority of certified CDFIs come in and apply for an award, we anticipate making up to 1,000 RRP awards with an average award size of around $1.2 million. Again, I've said this a few times, but this should be a very familiar process for those organizations that have applied for awards with us in the past. So with the kind of background about the program out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about eligibility. So only CDFIs that were certified as of the date the RRP NOFA was published in the Federal Register are eligible to apply. And that date was February 26th of 2021. So organizations were required to have received certification as of that date. This doesn't apply to a lot of our Native CDFIs, but we do have a couple of holding companies and banks out there. Only one of a depository institution holding company and their affiliated subsidiary bank can apply for an award. If both organizations apply, the subsidiary will be deemed ineligible and will evaluate the application of the bank holding company. Additionally, for our bank or holding company applicants, organizations will be required to have a Community Reinvestment Act assessment rating of at least satisfactory. For organizations that have, or banks that have a CRA assessment of below satisfactory, they'll be deemed ineligible. All CDFIs must have a minimum financial health and safety score of at least 4. This will capture the vast majority of organizations that apply for RRP. We very, very, very rarely have an organization come in and score a 5, which would be the lowest rating. I really hit on this earlier in the presentation when I was talking about the section of the application where organizations are going to attest and answer a couple of questions about their eligibility to be considered a CDFI that benefits or serves Native communities. What I want to really stress is that this criteria is the same as the eligibility for the NACA program, in that 50% of an applicant's past activities must be directed to a Native community, and their certification target market must either have a Native investment area or contain another targeted population of Native American, Alaska Natives, or Native Hawaiians. Okay, one thing that is a little bit different about the RRP program, similar to the NACA program, but different than the CDFI program, is that all awards will be in the form of a grant. There are no matching funds required to receive or apply for an RRP award. The minimum award that an organization can request is $200,000, and the maximum award that an organization can request is $5 million, although the CDFI fund does not anticipate making awards at that maximum $5 million threshold. We actually think the largest award will be quite a bit lower than $5 million. However, we won't know the exact award sizing until we have received all applications and evaluated all applications. So how can you, what determines the amount of the award that you can request? 150% of your total financial products closed in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year, or the minimum award amount of $200,000, whichever is greater. So if you're a smaller organization that is certified, and let's say you only close $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 in loans in your most recent historic fiscal year, that's fine. You're not locked out of the program. You'll be eligible to request a $200,000 award. And so for organizations with larger balance sheets and that have a higher level of lending, it'll be based on that 150% rule. So in other words, if your organization closed $1 million in financial products in its most recent historic fiscal year, you'll be eligible to request a $1.5 million RRP award. And $2 million would be financial products closed would be $3 million, so on and so forth. Another thing is that organizations without audited financial statements are eligible to apply for RRP, but their award request will be capped at $200,000. This was done to limit risk, and because we can't verify the application financial data that organizations submit as part of their applications without audits. So there is a cap for organizations without audited financial statements. As I've said a couple of times, a minimum of $25 million of the total funding will be awarded to benefit Native communities, but we'd really love to see that number get quite a bit above $25 million, excuse me. Another thing that's important to remember is that organizations do not have to request more than the minimum award if they're not comfortable requesting a larger amount. Let's say your organization isn't comfortable that it will be able to deploy or expend the full amount of the award within the period of performance. That's fine. You can request basically any amount you're eligible to down to that minimum of $200,000. Okay, the eligible activity categories, these should be very familiar to you all. They're analogous to the FA, the 5 FA authorized or eligible activities, and the 7 technical assistance authorized activities. The nuance in the RRP program is that organizations are allowed to, not required to, but allowed to expend the greater of $200,000 or 15% of the total RRP award on the technical assistance categories, which in RRP we're describing as categories supporting operations. So you've got flexibility with this award. It's a little bit of a hybrid of the FA and TA programs. Now, if your organization gets a $1 million RRP award, says we're good, we don't need to utilize any of the funding on the category supporting operations, that's fine. You can use the entire amount of the award to support the provision of financial products and or services. So you could use the entire $1 million to make loans under financial products or for loan loss reserves, so on and so forth. But you do have that flexibility to utilize some of the money for operations. The eligible lines of business, again, are analogous to what we allow or what are eligible for the NACA program and CDFI program. So these should all be familiar to your organizations. Okay, the period of performance for the RRP awards will be 2 full fiscal years. This operates in a manner similar to our CDFI program and NACA programs, in that the assistance agreements aren't exactly 2 years. The period of performance isn't exactly going to be 2 years. It's going to basically include the remainder of your current fiscal year when we announce awards, and then have 2 full fiscal years subsequent to that. So let's say we announced the awards in June, just as a hypothetical, and you've got a 9/30 fiscal year. You would have the remainder of your current fiscal year, and then the first year of your period of performance would end 9/30/2022, and the full period of performance would end on 9/30/2023. There are going to be annual reporting requirements. As of the current moment, we're intending to require reporting that is very similar to that included in your CDFI program or NACA program assistance agreements. So the TLR, the uses of award report, the performance progress report, your audit reports, standard fare on that front. The CDFI fund may request additional data at a later point. The Secretary of the Treasury is required to submit a report or a study to Congress after 18 months, detailing the results of some of our stimulus funding. So we may come back and request additional data, but we do intend to ensure that the burden on organizations receiving RRP awards is minimal, and that you receive sufficient notice of any additional information that we collect in order or want to collect, just so you're not caught off guard, you're not surprised. But at this point, we're just intending to collect our standard reports. The performance goals and measures are going to be pretty streamlined in comparison to our FA PGMs, which I think will be music to everyone's ears. All organizations that receive RRP awards will be required to expend the entire amount of the award in an eligible activity category by the end of the period of performance. And they'll be required to expend at least 90% of their initial payment within the first year of the period of performance. So all of our FA and TA recipients of past funding years should be familiar with that. Can't remember the exact number in the TA awards, but in the FA awards, it was a PGM we added, I believe, in the 2019 funding round, PGM 5-1. It'll work exactly the same. And if you're an organization that receives the minimum $200,000 award, that will be the end of your performance goals and measures. You will not have any benchmarks that require you to deploy financial products. So you could use, in theory, the entire amount of the award on those categories supporting operations. However, for organizations that receive more than the minimum award, there will be a requirement that your organization close at least 50%, close financial products in an amount at least equivalent to 50% of the RRP award size by the end of the first year of the period of performance, and 70% by the end of the period of performance. And similar to our NACA program and CDFI program awards, you'll be able to, or eligible to satisfy those lending-based PG&Ms using either the award or other funding available on your balance sheet. So in other words, an organization could get $1 million CDFI RRP award. They could utilize the entire amount of the grant for loan loss reserves, and then utilize other existing capital on their balance sheet to satisfy the lending requirement contained in this PG&M. So very similar in one way to the CDFI and NACA performance goals and measures. And for our native CDFIs, this lending must occur in native communities. So you've got to meet those 50% and 70% thresholds in a native community. Finally, I just want to highlight a few critical deadlines for everyone that's interested in applying for RRP. You've got to have your EIN and DUNS numbers entered in your AMOS organization profile by 11:59 p.m. Eastern on March 22nd. You've got to submit your SF424 and have it validated in grants.gov by March 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And then the application is due in AMOS on March 25th at 11:59 p.m. You also see the deadlines there for reaching out to us and contacting us with questions about the application or IT-related issues. So with that, I'm going to end my prepared remarks and open it up for Q&A about the RRP.
Great. Thank you, Clint. As folks put their questions together, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you. But I'll start with one question that I have. So if a CDFI's target market needs to be updated, what's the turnaround time to get that approved?
Our certification team typically tries to get a response to certification applications and updates to certifications within 90 days.
And I guess, so follow up, would that turnaround, can that be done and still apply for the grant in this time frame?
So I would say if an organization is certified as a CDFI and wants to update their target market and also apply for RRP, that shouldn't affect their eligibility to apply for the award. If an organization, let's say, doesn't have, a target market that includes a native investment area or one of the, 3 native other targeted populations that we allow for certification, they could still go ahead and apply for an RRP award. They just wouldn't be eligible for that kind of minimum $25 million threshold portion of the money. But it wouldn't affect their eligibility to receive an award otherwise. So I don't think that time will really be of the essence for those organizations to get an answer on their certification modification.
Okay, and I got one more question from the chat, and the question is, if you did not apply for CDFI funding in 2020, is there a way to request capital that exceeds the 2020 CDFI award?
Let me take a look at that question.
It was sent directly, so it's not in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, an organization, we don't, how can I say this? Whether an organization has applied for awards in the past or received awards in the past is not really a part of our analysis or evaluation of the RRP applications. Your eligibility to apply for and receive an RRP award basically comes down to, are you certified and do you submit your application? We're going to do due diligence reviews. So if you have an audit that has some major flags in there that makes us think you put funding at, risk for fraud, waste, and abuse, we're not going to make an award. But an organization can come in and request funding for the very first time from us via the RRP and receive an award.
Cool. And then we have a couple more in the chat, and maybe I'll just call on them. So Heidi Cooney, do you want to ask your question? You can come off mute.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for this presentation too. It was very informative. So I was wondering if there is a place in the application where we need to indicate which eligible uses we'll use the grant funds for, or if it's just kind of open and as long as we stay within those eligible uses through the performance period, it's fine.
The second portion of your comment is correct. We do not have like a line-by-line budget that's included in the assistance agreement. So these categories up on the screen are going to be what you've got to expend the award in. So no, we don't request that an organization or require that an organization say, oh, we're going to use $500,000 on financial products, $200,000 on loan loss reserves, and $50,000 on salary. Nope. So long as you expend within an eligible activity category and you satisfy that greater of 200,000 or 15% portion, you stay within those bounds, you're good to go. You can expend the award however you see fit.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we've got a question from Fern Ori. Fern, you mind coming off coming off mute and asking the question?
Sure. Hi, Jackson. Thank you, Clint, for the great presentation. Just a quick question on the audited financial statements. I'm sure it's written in the NOFA that I haven't reviewed carefully yet, but we're working on the FY20 audit and don't have it complete yet. So is the FY19 audit that sufficient for eligibility?
Is FY19 going to be your most recent historic year of financial data in the application?
No, it would be the 2020 year.
Let me take a look really quickly.
Unless I guess for the purposes for the RRP, is the historical year considered FY19 or FY 2020?
Let me take a look. What's your fiscal year end?
12/31.
Yeah, so for 12/31, organizations with 12/31, fiscal year 2019 is going to be your most recent historic fiscal year. So you're going to be good to go. 2020 is going to be your current year, and we're only requiring audits for that most recent historic fiscal year for purposes of that $200,000 maximum or $200,000 cap.
And then the FY19 for 12/31 fiscal year end dates would be the historic data that we're using for total deployment, et cetera, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. And we've got a question. Amber Schultz from AT&I wants to see if we can get a copy of the slide deck. Can we?
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of serves as a nice transition into another thing that I meant to show you. Similar to the CDFI program and Native Initiatives pages on the CDFI Fund website, we've got a section up for RRP. You can access it at the top of the page in our standard menu by clicking on CDFI Rapid Response Program. We've also set up a handy little vanity URL, which is cdfifund.gov/RRP. And that'll take you to all of our public-facing guidance documents. And we do have the slide deck up. Let me see which one of these it is. I believe it's number 2 right here. Yeah, number 2 right here. And it's got a whole lot more information. I just hit the very high points of the presentation with you all today in order to allow time for questions and answers. But this is a great resource and it's available on our website. Another thing that reminds me of since I'm here, we had a public webinar on the 3rd in which we went over the entire slide deck. That was recorded and it's going to be posted on the website. But on the 10th, so I guess this coming Wednesday, we're doing another public webinar. We're probably going to do a much higher level presentation, kind of like the one I did with you all, and reserve the remainder of the 2 hours for question and answer. So if after my comments today, you guys take a look at the application materials and the application itself and have some questions, please come back and join us on the 10th.
Cool. And what we want to open it up to anybody else that has questions, just jump right in.
Hi, Jackson. This is Pete Upton.
Hey, Pete, go for it.
I just needed to clarify there. So if we had a year end of 12/31, the 2019 audit would be your audit that you use, correct? Following up on Fern's question, I was a little bit confused there.
Yep, correct. I apologize. Let me see if I can get back to that guidance document. Yeah, here we go. Right here on page 23 of the RRP application guidance is going to be the table that you can refer back to after our call today. Yeah, but for organizations with or without audited FY20 information that have a 12/31 fiscal year end date, you're going to have 2017, 18, and 19 as your historic financial data. And then FY 2020 as of December 31, 2020 is going to be your current year of financial data.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Clint, so when does the CDFI fund plan to get the funding out? And
We don't have a date specified right now. I mean, it's definitely going to be by 9/30. The funding, expires on 9/30. So I'll just say we're working on a very expedited timeline, and understand the urgency to get these awards and this funding out into our communities. So we are working very quickly and anticipate making awards just as soon as we can.
great. And again, I want to open up to anybody else that has questions.
And I do want to clarify, just so I don't confuse anyone, when I say the funding expires on 9/30, that's the deadline placed on us. We've got to make the awards by 9/30. That doesn't mean we're going to make the awards and then you've got to expend the funds by 9/30. Just for our purposes, for appropriations law, we've got to get this funding out the door by 9/30 of this year.
And then, while we have this pause, I know that this is about the rapid response, which is the first part of the 3 million that the CDFI fund is going to be expending. Do you have an idea about the second part, and specifically the 1.2 billion that is going to be for minority depository institutions and minority CDFIs?
I haven't done a lot of work on that program myself. I can say, broadly, the CDFI fund is taking a much more deliberate approach to the development of that program because there is a little bit more flexibility. I don't think those funds expire, or if they do, it's quite a ways down the line compared to the RRP program. So we're kind of developing the two programs in different tranches on different paths. With the RRP, we understand the urgency around that funding and that it was designed to get out very quickly in order to allow our CDFIs to respond to COVID-19. And, the minority lending funding is also, very urgent, but we've got a little bit more work to do on developing programmatic guidelines, developing new definitions, building out the program. So I think what we'll see on the minority lending amount of funding is that there'll be a little bit more public outreach and maybe some requests for comment that come down the pike for the CDFI industry before that program is actually launched. So I don't have a specific timeline because I'm not sure that we've gotten that far in the process of developing the program. But just know that it's going to be a little bit more, we're going to be a little bit more calculated and make sure that we stand that program up in a way that's responsive to Congress's intent and the feedback that we get from the CDFI industry.
Okay. Well, thanks, Clint. And I know you know this, but the native CDFI world definitely wants to be involved in that conversation, and we want to make sure that native CDFIs are at that table when developing the minority lending program. So just if you can share that with your team at the CDFI fund, we'd appreciate that. And we'll be following up as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. And it looks like we got another question from Michael Ching. Michael, do you want to come off mute and you can ask it?
Yeah, Clint, thank you. Wonderful presentation. And I'll apologize. I'm a little bit new to this. I'm looking over the application spreadsheet and wondering if funding opportunity is based on accumulated most recent 3 years or most recent 4 years.
So we're collecting 3 years of historic data and then the current year, we're collecting 3 years of historic financial data and the current year of financial data in the application. We need that full amount of data to kind of do the financial analysis to ensure minimum safety and soundness of our organizations. But for purposes of the amount of funding that an organization can request, it's only based on the most recent historic fiscal year. So just 1 year of historic fiscal financial data will determine the amount of funding that an organization is eligible to apply for.
Any way to increase that amount over most recent fiscal year?
No, not at this point. It's going to be that most recent historic fiscal year. And if your organization is newer or smaller, keep in mind that all certified CDFIs will be eligible to request at least $200,000, and we're not going to make an award lower than $200,000. So there is that minimum floor if your organization doesn't have, very significant financial activity in that most recent historic fiscal year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One more question around that, Clint. So I'm thinking if I'm a CDFI whose fiscal year ends on the December 31st, and so you're saying most recent historical fiscal year, are you talking the 2019 or 2020 if your fiscal year ends on the?
So it's dependent on an organization's fiscal year end. That's a great question that we get quite a bit. So based on this table right here, table 13 in the RRP application guidance, organizations with a 3/31 or 6/30 fiscal year end and organizations that have a 9/30 fiscal year end with final audited FY20 information, they'll use FY 2020 as their most recent historic fiscal year. And for organizations that have a 9/30 fiscal year end without final FY 2020 audited information and organizations with 12/31 fiscal year ends, they'll use FY 2019 as their most recent historic fiscal year. And this is something that isn't always incredibly intuitive, but it's consistent with how we handle the same issue in the CDFI program and NACA program applications. So it shouldn't trip anyone up if you've applied for awards in the past. May look a little strange, but it is how we've done it for several years now.
And then as a follow-up, let's say if your CDFI did, I guess, more lending and grew in 2020, but the most recent numbers that you'll accept is 2019. Is there any way, maybe that doesn't apply to anybody, but if it did, I think that would be a challenge.
Yeah, no, we cannot do that. We just had to take an approach that was consistent across the board because some organizations maybe had a better 2019 than a 2020 and vice versa.
Yeah.
So we really just had to stick with our consistent approach to the application and went with a determination that the award request would be based on the most recent historic fiscal year.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? Well, I don't have any other questions. I want to say thank you to Clint and the CDFI Fund for joining us. And we want to, I guess, share the information here. And also, I do want to underline that we want to be involved very much so and work as much as hand in hand as possible when the CDFI Fund designs its next the minority lending program.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that willingness to be a partner and make sure that we develop a program that is responsive to the needs of Native CDFIs and Native communities. So I'll definitely pass that along, and that was going to be our intent either way, but it's always great to hear it and have such a good partnership. One more thing that I want to say before we wrap up today is please remember these deadlines. And if I can issue a little bit of a challenge to everyone on the call today or on the Zoom meeting today is, if you can, get in grants.gov this afternoon and put together your SF424 and submit it as soon as possible. That is just a very simple form that most of you should be familiar with. We've got some resources in the application guidance that will assist you in completing that form. If it's your first time or it's been a few years since you have completed the SF424, we've got the instructions right here starting on page 10. Probably something that you can do in an hour or two, if that. And it is a requirement in order to be eligible to apply for an award. And it's something every year, it breaks our heart. We see organizations miss this first deadline, and we don't want to see that for any of our Native CDFIs or any of our CDFIs out there. So if you can today or early next week, go ahead and log in and get that form submitted, and you'll already be halfway to having your application completed and hopefully receiving an award here in the next few months.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good point. March 22nd is going to be here very soon. So
yep.
Cool.
And like I said earlier in my comments, we do have that minimum $25 million threshold.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can get the number of Native CDFIs that apply for an award, it's my hope that we can get that number well above $25 million. And this is kind of a unique opportunity for probably most of our organizations. We know that whenever there's funding set aside for Native communities, it's often a scenario in which there's a finite amount of resources, and the more organizations that come in, it's not that the pie gets bigger, it's just that the slices of the pie get smaller. And I think with the RRP, we've got a unique opportunity to actually make the pie bigger for Native communities. So if we can lean on you guys and get Native participation in this program up, it'll make everybody at the CDFI Fund very happy.
Thank you, Clint. Appreciate it. And with that, we'll wrap things up. As I noted in the beginning, we're moving to a format of bi-weekly Friday calls, and so the first and third Friday of every month. The next one will be March 19th, and that'll be right before this March 22nd deadline. So hopefully next time we see everybody's submitted their SF424 by that point. And with that, I want to see if anybody from our board, Cindy or Pete or Christopher or Natalie, has any final words before we shut things down. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody, and we will be in touch, and keep up the great work, Native CDFIs.